Okay, at 4:02, we're going to call to order the study session. And first on the agenda is the BEST grant presentation.
Good evening, President Archuleta, distinguished members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Brego. We are here tonight to provide you information on the work we are doing and have been doing on the BEST grant and to answer any questions you may have regarding that. We have prepared a PowerPoint for you and prepared packets for you with information that we are currently looking at. If we may please approach the dais to distribute those items.
Good evening.
Thank you very much.
The objective tonight is to have a deeper understanding of the BEST grant, to know how schools were selected in the process, to know BEST grant application process, and to know timeline for BEST grant. To begin, we'd like to give you some information on. You can find a handout in your packet to follow along. And Ms. Burke will kind of show you the
Building excellent schools today?
Yes, sir.
We'll go in order, so your documents will be in order at the PowerPoint, so we'll go through and refer them to you so we can explain them as we go along.
So what is the BEST grant? The BEST grant stands for Building Excellent Schools Today. BEST focuses on helping public schools with capital construction needs. The goal of the BEST grant is to provide a first-class, high-performing 21st century facilities and help alleviate health and safety concerns throughout Colorado. The purpose of this grant is to focus on health and safety is the biggest points in which CDE is looking at making schools better for students. BEST grant has several revenue sources. The BEST grant has 4 sources to fund schools. Those funds come from state land trust funds, marijuana exercise taxes, Colorado lottery spillover funds, and interest accumulated on other monies that the state has. Districts must provide match for the BEST grant. Adams 14 matches 42% of the projected cost. So for instance, if we were looking at $100 million, the responsibility of the district would be $42 million. So I would say 42 cents on the dollar is what we're currently looking at in terms of what our allocation would be for building something.
Would you welcome questions as we go along?
Absolutely. It would be better because it's kind of
Okay.
a fluid thing, but if there's something that's throwing you off, by all means, just ask.
Well, okay, I'll ask you the question, you can put it, delay it, or
Okay.
address it. Just, I'm curious, in Adams 14, our match is 42%. Do you know what the range is and from high and low, and is 42 typical, or
Yeah.
you know, where does that fall within the spectrum?
That's actually coming next in your packet.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the BEST grant types, there are 3 types of grants available. The BEST cash grants used to fund small projects such as roof boilers and replacement, fire alarm systems and things of such. These are what Adams 14 has currently been looking at and doing. We have the BEST lease purchase grants, highlighted in pink, used to fund large projects, new schools, major renovations and additions. And you have the BEST grant emergency grants, used for unanticipated events that threaten the health and safety of buildings. With our presentation today, we will focus on lease purchase grant, which is highlighted in pink. That's the grant we'll be looking at. We'd like to share with you our process on how schools were selected for our BEST grant. Our process began with creating a BEST grant committee. We began by looking at the best grant historically. Adams 14 uses grant for roofs, boilers, replacements of other items. As we looked at our CFI index, or the condition facility index, that CDE uses to basically rate your schools, we realized that our schools were in greater need, and more research on what was appropriate and the opportunities that the grant offer where we needed to look further into. We found that the grant had three options, one being a replacement of schools, and then we started creating this committee. So we started looking at our conditions facility index. We realized that yes, you could renovate some of these buildings, but in the long run, would the renovation last long enough for our kids to actually transition all the way through high school without being displaced with more renovations and such? So when you look at our buildings that are built mostly in about 1950 and so on, they're old bones, old pipes, galvanized, electrical conduits sticking out of walls, things like that are very unsafe and not conducive to 21st century learning. It was determined that through our committee that it was in our best interest to replace these buildings.
So next in your packet, what you will see is a document from the Colorado Department of Education. And Dr. Hyde, this will speak to your point. Once our committee determined that the best route for Adams 14 was to look at a school replacement, we then explored the research on what the best grant said for that option. So you'll find what the district minimum matching calculation for the best grant applications are provided here. Followed behind that with the district minimum matching percentages across the state, listed alphabetically from all the districts. You have that information. Adams 14 is third on the list. Behind that document, you will find the board policy as we're looking at the number of students that can be in a facility if we were going to continue with a rebuild of a school. So we wanted to make sure that our committee had all this information as we're looking forward to make sure that this was still the best fit for Adams 14.
So how are the schools selected for the best grant? Our process began with creating a best grant committee, which we explained, viewing the best grant application and timeline provided by CDE, viewing the best grant evaluation tool provided by CDE, viewing the best grant master plan guideline provided by CDE, gathering data for best grant committee, and creating an internal timeline for best grant committee prior to grant application opening, and finally creating an internal timeline for the work on the best grant application. To support our work on the grant, we collected data to determine how the needs and to guide us on which grant route was best for Adams 14. In the data we collected is school assessment report provided by CDE, the conditions facility index, as I mentioned earlier, and the best grant school data spreadsheet created by the best grant committee. So in your packet, you'll see a revised draft school assessment report by CDE. These are specific to the two schools. I'm trying not to mention the schools yet. These are specific, but it's kind of give it away. Allsup and Adams City Middle School. These are specific to those schools. This is what CDE came in and evaluated each school and gave it a rating. And that rating for each school is in this document, and we have it listed here on our PowerPoint as well. And that starts with the conditions facility index, which determines how much of that school is usable and how much is not. And in your packet also you'll see a kind of a short list there that shows kind of where the schools are at this point. Some of the schools listed in our district. Kind of created a short list for you so you can see, looking forward, where are our schools currently in the condition facilities index. This report will give us information that CDE has found on each school, such as the condition, the cost of replacement, renovation, etc. The report is included in your packet for you to review. So please look at that. What's that? Energy is another one. And in terms of the amount of cost of it takes to run each building. And as they get older, some of the efficiencies kind of start running out. So in your packet, you'll see a comprehensive facility master plan that was created in 2010. Also, in your package, you'll see that those conditions facilities index were also conducted in 2010. So this is a plan that has been in process since 2010, and looking at our schools and seeing what is in the best interest of our district in terms of the conditions of our building, and what is it going to take in order to make sure our kids are getting a 21st century education that they well deserve. So knowing that, we took this plan, we contacted H&L, they're now Trainer H&L, the architectural company that helped create this. We started working in collaboration to put this grant together for CDE to possibly build 2 new schools for Adams 14. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is one of the reports that we created internally that you'll have. This is part of how we determined which 2 schools to focus on. And there were several variables that went into play when we were looking at this report. So from the documents that Gianni has already talked about, we then created a list of all the schools that Adams 14 has, their enrollment data. To the right of the enrollment data, you'll see a little arrow that indicates if the student enrollment has gone up or has gone down, or a dash if it stayed the same. We have the CFI report, which is provided to us by CDE, that indicates the percentage of the building that no longer functions, along with the percentage that still functions the way that it's intended to. We have those ranked accordingly. The square foot for each building, we've ranked that, as well as the square footage per pupil. The cost that CDE has estimated for the renovations, we've ranked that in purple next to it, followed by the cost that CDE has reported for us to rebuild the schools, and then we've ranked those. You'll notice on the report that Central comes up as number 1 on here. However, we couldn't look at them yet because we have used a past best grant to replace the roof on there, and so they're not eligible for a replaced school until that grant or the life of the roof has been extended, and we're not there yet. I think there's 1 or 2 years left. So then we went to our second ranked school, which is Alsup, and that's how we landed on that school based off of the data that we have here. CDE then provided a consultant for us that we've been matched with for the BEST grant, who came in to do a walkthrough to see if our recommendation from our BEST grant committee would be a good school for this to be eligible for the BEST grant. She also ended up at Adams City Middle School and gave the recommendation that both schools would be eligible for a BEST grant application, and that's how Adams City Middle School got in, even though they're ranked lower. So Adams City Middle School was brought in as a second application based off of the recommendation of CDE.
So, question. So, they seen Adams City Middle School. Did they see Monaco?
No, it was actually that we were meeting this individual at Alsup. She had bad directions and went to Adams City Middle School and actually started walking through Adams City Middle School and discovered the condition of that building. And then when she encountered the secretary and said, you know, I'm looking for this meeting, the secretary called Alsup and said, you know, your individual you're looking for is here at our school. So she came across the street to Alsup, and that's where we had our meeting and walked through Alsup.
Right,
So.
right. But she's seen the middle school and
She
wanted
saw-
to walk through the middle school
Mm-hmm.
without seeing Monaco, which was number 3 on the list, or the number 4 school on the list is.
Right, so we anticipated just doing one school.
Mhm.
Being that Alsup was the second on the list, that would be the prime school that CD would support. She just happened to be in the wrong school and looked at that condition. And we talked about our plan. she suggested that we also include Adams City Middle School based on the plan that we had presented to her, and where we wanted to locate this school, how we wanted to put programming in place. She said it would only make sense because of that light rail to also
Because of
do this school at the
proximity
same
of each
time.
other.
Yes, sir.
So during that meeting, we had CDE there as well as our operational team, the principal of ALSUP, and we walked the whole facility of ALSUP, taking pictures. CDE took pictures of the facility as well as our team here to see and determine first if ALSUP would be a good candidate for this grant. We then went through the plan that we have, the work that our committee had already started, and all the data we'd collected, as well as informed them of our 2010 master plan. At that time, when we were going through all of that, the representative from CDE mentioned that ALSUP would be a good Adams City Middle, would be a good candidate, which is how the second application came in.
So how are the best grants selected? How are the schools selected for best? Best grant focuses on health and safety. When she walked through these buildings, she discovered that the health and safety of our students was at risk based on the conditions of those buildings. And that included the infrastructure, the plumbing, electrical was inadequate, restroom facilities, heating, ventilation, cooling issues, the security line. If you notice that in a lot of our schools, if someone comes through the front door, they have direct access to enter the building and go down the hallways and visit classrooms without checking in. That's one of the concerns in all of our buildings at this point. Transportation, unsafe drop-off and pickup. Construction materials, asbestos. A lot of our schools have still old asbestos, and that needs to be abated. A lot of mastic in the flooring. A lot of our buildings aren't 21st century ADA compliant. That needs to be changed. Water infiltration. A lot of our schools have negative grade, a lot of water coming back into the schools. A lot of our schools have lift stations, so we're taking sewage and water and we're lifting it up to pump it out into the sewer system. And our playgrounds, the last time our playgrounds were done was something like 2003 or 1996, somewhere in that range. How are schools selected for best grant again? Again, we viewed this data from CDE, ranked each school based on need, using that data, along with not only using the data, but also using the data that CDE gave us on what renovations they've done to some of our schools. Because once they do those renovations, they're not eligible for a period of time. So you don't want to wait on that and then miss opportunities for best grant. We determine the pros and cons. What are the pros and cons of building? What are the pros and cons of renovation? We developed some options. Presented options to the district and CDE, best grant, and the consultant. We completed walkthroughs of the facilities with CDE, and that was completed on January 9th. The schools again selected were ALSUP and Adams City Middle School. If you look at their CFI rating, ALSUP came in at 75.9, and Adams City Middle School came in at 63.2. Yeah, so 75.9% means that 75.9% of that school is in need of being rebuilt. It's saying that 24.1% of that building is adequate for 21st century learning in today's conditions. And same goes for Adams City Middle School. So if you look at that entire list that we presented to you, not one of our schools are less than 50% except for the new high school, which was built a few years back. So what the committee determined along with CDE is that it is in our best interest because of the light rail to move. I'm going to grab this mic real quick. It is in our best interest to move Adams City Middle School along with ALSUP onto the old high school property. And what this does is it eliminates the eyesore that exists right now and the complaints we get from the community. We're looking at, with the architect, CDE, and our committee, is moving ALSUP here and Adams City Middle School somewhere in here and making this a track area or field, maybe parking lot, this area for other field use and things like that. So what this does is it eliminates kids being dropped off at one school, walking across to Alsup, crossing the street and picking up their siblings, they can transfer within this whole region without ever stepping onto a street. Not only that, it eliminates kids from being too close to the light rail and pushes them further back into the city where we can keep good eyes on them so they're not crossing those tracks. It also provides a continuum of services. There was some talk about doing a PK8. What happens there is you create a very large building based on one type of program, and if that program no longer needs to exist, now you have a large, comprehensive school of approximately 1,400 kids. This way, you still have a PK8 campus, and you can still keep them separate. So if programs change, you're not subject to keeping all of the students in one building. They will share the facilities, the playgrounds, the fields and things like that. The playgrounds will be separate. They'll be closer to the school. So our grant timeline, where'd the timeline go? What's that? Oh. Yeah, it's in there. It's in your packet right there. Can I see that one? So the BEST grant came out late September, and we began working on it immediately, doing research, what was in the best interest of our district. And the people involved in our committee, when we built that committee, consists of all the principals, assistant superintendents, executive assistant, Monica, finance, communications. We also invited Ms. Barb McDowell, although she hasn't been able to participate because of her class schedule. That kind of switched from Thursdays to Tuesdays, so that made it difficult for her. But I did invite her to come in, and we'll have that dialogue whenever she has the opportunity. Director of Operations, myself and Sheila Burke, Mr. Archuleta was on the board as well, and of course our H&L architectural firm. So when we started this work in September, we researched, built our committee. Committee starts going through doing their research and kind of putting some things together, and we are currently in the process of working on that application. It's long and extensive, but we're getting closer. The grant will be due February 23rd to the state, and that has to be hand-delivered.
I also wanted to point out that each person on our committee has an area of expertise that we can utilize to help us writing this grant, as this one is new for our district. Not the BEST grant, but going for a school replacement. And so we wanted to make sure that our committee was well-rounded so that we can utilize everybody's expertise to make sure that we're making the best decision for our children here in Adams 14.
Okay. And again, October to December, we collect the data needed for the grant narrative. January through February, we'll meet with our committees. Complete grant narrative sections. And February and March, provide information to CDE as requested. April and May, Adams 14 presents to the state board. We get that opportunity. May through June, CDE announces projects that will be funded. And in July, we'll get the okay to start working on that construction. We won't be able to break ground in July because that's just really fast, but we'll be given the okay to start working with the architectural firm, the contractor, to start laying things out. So just kind of give you a snapshot of our work. In week one was the BEST grant reviewed assessment data, identified the pros and cons of the data. Week two, reviewed previous meeting. We went into discussing the barriers. We reviewed the rubric, discussed bond planning with the grant. Week three, again, we always review the previous meeting and make sure we didn't miss anything. We narrowed down our options, discussed funding sources, discussed bond planning to a great extent, and viewed the application rubric. And then in week five, we met with CDE. That was January 9th. So this has been a 10-week process thus far. Contact the contractor, view Board of Education policies, and if you remember, we presented, or not presented, there was a superintendent's rec to change policy for student count at our building, because Alsup right now does not have preschool in their building because they do not have the capacity to put those students in there. So there was a superintendent's rec to change that policy so we could then accommodate those kids for this reason.
So the Friday update, you,
Friday
the
updates?
regulation.
Regulation, yeah, sorry.
In your packet, you'll find the evaluation tool that we have for our best grant application, along with the timeline that CDE has provided. We've also built in 2 internal timelines to keep us on track with preparing both best grants for both Alsop and Adams City Middle School. We don't have the whole complete application because it's online. However, CDE has a sample on their website if you wanted to view it to see what it consists of. We also have included in your packet the budget that we have to complete and turn in along with each application for you to view.
Thank you. And so week 1, moving forward, this is the next set of 5 weeks. Best Grant Committee meeting. We met with the contractor, completed the grant application sections 1 and 2, and created a communications plan. Part of this meeting here is part of our communications plan. Week 2 will be the Best Grant Committee meeting with the contractor to complete application sections 3. That's along with the architectural firm. Send out internal communications plan. Week 3, we will meet with the contractor, complete grant applications section 4, send out external communication plan, and update the superintendent. Week 4, we will meet with the contractor, complete grant application 5, section 5, send out external communication plan, and update the superintendent. In the final week, before submitting to CDE, we will meet with the contractor, complete grant application 7 and 8, and checklist, and send out external communication plans. And week 6, we have to submit to CDE. So in our process, we developed an internal and an external communication plan so everybody was informed. And in that internal communication plan, the BEST committee created an internal communication plan as a committee. So we, Board of Education study session, we met with Alsop and Adams City Middle School principals, met with all school principals and directors to make sure they were aware of what we were planning on, provide a PowerPoint and talking points for all those schools to share with their stakeholders. And those will go out tomorrow. Best Grant schools will receive more detailed information in a PowerPoint and talking points as we submit information to you. The external communication plan will be Best Committee will create modes. We'll use the website, DAC, superintendent forums, email. We'll present it, those schools' PTOs, those back meetings, staff meetings, board study sessions, provide PowerPoints and talking points for all those schools so they are sending out the same information. And again, the Best Grant schools will receive more detailed information in PowerPoint talking points so they are giving their stakeholders more detailed information. In closing, we're hoping this, in this study session to have a deeper understanding of the Best Grant, to know how schools were selected, to know the Best Grant application process, and to know the timeline of the Best Grant. I know this is a lot of information, and so we're prepared to answer any questions you may have. Also, we've presented in this, in your packet, a map of the district, so you can see kind of what our boundaries are. The old high school property, as well as the aerial maps of Alsop and Adams City Middle School. So you can kind of get an overall perspective of what that's going to look like in that transition and those facilities. And welcome.
I'm the new guy here, so could you tell me, are the Best Grants an annual process, or is this a one-time thing, and once this goes through, we won't see it again?
It's an annual process. However, rumor has it that this may be the last year. Talking to some of the individuals at CDE and some of those that sit on the board said that, you know, there is some work going on right now to make sure that they can extend this program further. But this has been in the works for quite some time. I know Mapleton has started in 2009, 2010 with some Best Grants schools being built.
I think, Ms. Burke, you had mentioned earlier on that Adams 14 was eligible for up to 4 sites being either built or renovated. Was that correct? Did I hear you say that?
So we're not eligible for 4. So typically we can submit as many applications as we need. The Best Grant Committee typically usually funds 1 per district up to 2. Because we have the support of CDE to do the 2 from their recommendation, that's why we moved forward on it. We haven't seen, or I haven't seen where other districts have submitted more than 1, but we have seen districts that have put in 2 applications.
Okay. And it seems to me the emphasis for this whole program is to replace aging facilities. Has any thought, or does the demographics, the future demographics, come into play in terms of whether the district's expanding and may need larger facilities or more facilities? Does that, I haven't seen how that might roll in. play
Yeah, so
into it.
CD is very clear that you cannot use this to expand facilities or to expand your district. It is strictly for replacement of those buildings that are in dire need because of health and safety reasons. And there's also a fine line that over a certain amount of time, we have to make sure that those buildings aren't becoming historical sites, because once they become historical sites over a long period of time, they're no longer eligible as well. So Adams 14 is looking at getting close to some of those dates if we don't start acting here pretty quick.
To add what Gianni just said, the BEST grant does not fund potential growth for students in the district. It will only fund the current growth of students that we have right now. So if we're looking to expand, for example, the dog track property, knowing that there may be potential homes that are built on that site and we know that may impact Central, we can't anticipate those. What we can do as a district, if we know that ahead of time, is work with our architectural firm to add on an addition that would be funded from the district but not from the BEST grant.
Yeah. So moving forward, we'd look at the construction and the architectural design of these buildings. If there is a need to expand, that wing would be sitting there ready to expand. We also looked at the expansion of ALSUP, and knowing that our preschool students are not in that building because there's no room, that doesn't count in terms of creating a bigger footprint for that new building, because those kids who should be in that building are not, because that building cannot house them due to size.
Going on that aspect, can you expand for the students that are bused to Monaco when they live right there across the street from where ALSUP will be, the Fairfax property? Because they used to go to ALSUP, but because of the number of students, we now bus them to Monaco. So we wouldn't be able to do that?
That'd be a boundary change. If those boundary changes are creating a situation those kids are going to Monaco now, it'd take a boundary change to get them back, and CD would see that, so you gotta be real careful. However, if they are on this boundary line and they're just opting to go to Monaco because of the crowding, that'd be a different situation, and we'd have to look into that, and then we could add those numbers to the
I
construction.
don't think they're asking. I think the
Okay.
situation was, and I don't think nobody's on the board here when we passed that, because Monaco was understaffed or under students, and
Oh.
ALSUP was balding, so we said we're going to bus the students that are supposed to attend ALSUP, and the ones that lived in the Fairfax area, and so there's a 1, 2, 3, there's like 4 blocks. So to me, if we could, that'd be great, because I think we could save on transportation. And once again, talking about safety, we have to have those students have to cross 72nd, then go down the back way, and so they can reach Monaco. But whereas if they were going to ALSUP, it's just basically across the street, across 6 and 85, and then they would be, if we go to the new school.
We could look at that for sure, and if it takes a little bit of tweaking and kind of see what that would take and the involvement of that. We'll look into that for sure.
What we would look at is the current boundaries that we have, and if the students are temporarily misplaced because the school is not able to hold them at capacity, just like our preschool programs, and they would still be considered and eligible for adding on to ALSUP for that program. If the boundaries were adjusted to move the students to Monaco, then they would not be considered.
Can you provide the Board of Education the meetings, the minutes from y'all meetings, the information y'all collected?
The agendas and yeah.
Not the agenda, what y'all collected, the meetings, how y'all, the information y'all collected for y'all meetings. I think y'all had, what, 3, 4?
I have the agendas with me, and I have all the chart paper that we have. It's hanging in Gianni's office. So I have all that. I can provide it to you or take you down so that you can see it along with all the notes that we have on the board. But I have all the agendas here along with our notes from each of the meetings.
Yeah,
So,
just
yes.
provide them to Monica for our Friday update so we
I'll
can
take
see them this
pictures
Friday.
of all of our chart papers so that you guys have that as well.
It's a pretty extensive workroom, so it's everywhere.
So I have one question. So, just so I'm clear, if ALSUP is 49,762 square feet, the replacement school, if we're able to get this, would be the same size?
I think you're looking at the conditions facility report. I don't think the 2 preschool rooms at ALSUP are adjusted in that. I found 2 different numbers. I found the 49,000, I found the 55,000. So we're looking at, talking to CD, we're talking about 65 to 70,000 based on our numbers what that building would be.
Right, but I mean, so it's not necessarily a replacement of a school or of that school doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same size because a classroom may be too small for 21st learning, so that classroom may have to be expanded, but that would be okay to do that in the BEST grant application form? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, so the BEST grant is going to look at the programs that we have available at those schools, such as programs around social emotional learning, programs around special needs, autism, general education classrooms, ELD programming, and based off of those programmings, we'll determine what the footprint of the school looks like. There's a mock one from our 2010 master plan. And then they have an estimate based off of our board policies what the sizes of those rooms should be according to the student ratio in each of those rooms. And so the building will potentially grow because of the square footage that they have per student or per pupil, depending on the programs that we offer at those schools.
Thank you. That's good news for me because, you know, some of our classrooms are not conducive to 21st learning because of their size.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that there may be room for.
Also in our committee, we
Expanding those.
also addressed some of the needs that our buildings have. So for instance, that we don't have facilities for students with special needs. We don't have facilities for preschool at that school, at that site. And some of the things that we know we need for our students wouldn't be something we couldn't do. We can do it because that's part of our programming. I can send you guys this electronically. It was just very thick to copy, but if you'd like that electronically, I can send it to Monica so you can look at the 2010 master plan and see where that all developed from.
So in our 2010 master plan, on page 20, it talks about the size. If we have 600 students, the approximate square footage of the school would be close to 7,000 or 70,000 square feet, which would be an increase from what ALSUP currently is. And the middle school would be
39.
at 140,000 square feet approximately, which would also be an increase. Knowing that these are rough estimates, our work with the contractor will help us to determine based off of the programming each school what the square footage of the building should be and based off of the student count.
Could you tell me for Adams to raise its 42% share? What's the process for that? Is that going to be a stretch or is that a piece of cake for Adams 14?
Well, what we're going to do is go for what's called a best grant match waiver. So say, for instance, our portion to build ALSUP was $10 million. we could go for a best match waiver, which would reduce that cost for the district to somewhere around 4.5 million or so. But we are looking at doing best match waivers for both Alsop and Adams City Middle School.
So to answer your question, Dr. Hyde, it wouldn't be unrealistic for us to do that as long as CDE accepts our waiver. If they don't accept our waiver, then we would be potentially looking at redoing one school using the district reserves account. And we've been working with finance to make sure that we have it within our budget to do that safely so that the district can still operate and have plenty in case other emergencies come up or other district needs are to arise. We would be looking at having the district fund half of the matching, and we're asking the best grant to fund the other half for each application for Alsop and Adams City Middle School. We've played out different scenarios with the committee to see if we're only awarded one waiver, what we can do, and if we're not awarded any waivers, what would be our next option. So the committee has looked at all of those to make sure that it's no cost to our taxpayers. Now it would be within reason for the district to do, and in the best interest of our students, still making sure that we operate as normal and conservatively.
And some of our research that we continue to do is reach out to other districts that may have gotten that best grant match dollars and see how low they were able to drop that percentage to see if we can minimize the amount that the district would have to present.
What will be the final disposition of the 2 vacated schools? Will they be raised or mothballed, or what will happen to the old schools?
That'd be something we'd have to present to the board and see what they would like to do.
Okay, so that's
Yeah, that's, although, part of the best grant would be demolition. So, looking at that, it'd be only advantageous for us to start having that conversation during this time, because with all the asbestos, the abatement that needs to be done, we're looking at an extensive amount of money to demolish those buildings. And you either can allow someone, if they purchase that property, to demolish it, or we can continue to spend money and monitor those buildings. It can be quite extensive. That's another conversation.
So our team will provide a recommendation to Dr. Abrego, and then he would then provide that to the school board. Would ultimately it'd be your decision to determine what you'd like to do with those 2 properties, if we're awarded the grants.
My last question here regards the grant timeline. Like on slide 20 and through there. Does at any point the school board need to approve any of these actions?
In terms of the
the best grant timeline prior to application, and then during. There's a number of, you said weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, and there's a number of checkpoints essentially.
You guys
Does
have
the
already
board have to write off, approve the 10 or 20, $30 million it's going to be?
Yes, you would
At
definitely.
what point does that come into play?
Once we're awarded.
Okay.
You have not voted on Adams City Middle School yet. Is that coming through tonight?
So Adams City Middle School's approval to apply for the best grant will be presented to you tonight in the board meeting. The approval to apply for the best grant for Alsop was already presented and approved by the school board to move forward with that application. And so we'll provide checkpoints to the board along the way to make sure that you're informed, whether it's through our weekly update or biweekly updates through the federal programs department, and coming to provide you with study sessions so that you're able to ask questions and see the work that we've done collectively.
Okay, thank you.
The only other one you'll do is the contractors. Once we determine that we're going to move forward with building a building, of course we'll have to do the RFP. The contractors will have to be approved, and any contracts going forward that are that exceed that board threshold.
So currently we have H&L, which is also currently known as
Trainer H&L.
Trainer H&L. Their contract for us is below the 15,000, so you won't see that presented to the board. It will come back to you if Adams City Middle School's approval to apply for the BEST grant application is approved. Then they will also contract us to help us independently to write the BEST grant application for the budget. Then you'll receive that application because it will put us over the dollar amount where we need board approval. After that, their contract is only set up to help us write the BEST grant. If we are awarded it, we would go through the RFP process, and if they wanted to contend in that, they would have to go through the same process that all other vendors would go through to see. So they're not obligated, even though they've helped us now. And we chose them because they helped us with the 2010 master plan. They just had a deeper knowledge of our district and our facilities.
Are there any other questions?
I just want to thank you for all your hard work. I know that a lot of things go into this, and I happen to be in a couple of sessions with you folks where you were trying to figure out what was going on and what's going to be best and how we're gonna move forward. And I just want to say thank you for all of your work that you did. It's a lot of work. I know that you've probably gone above and beyond what you even thought you were going to be able to do. But thank you very much for bringing the information to us to see if we can move forward and see if we can work on something. One last question for you, though. Worst case scenario, you get an approval for both of them with no waiver, right? So the price of the school is, I don't know, $10 million, right, to build the two of them. Has there been conversation about a possibility of a pre-K through 8 school combination, or could you do that through the BEST grant or not and build one school twice as big, or?
No, we couldn't do that, but we did think about,
Can I explain why?
yeah, go ahead.
Let me explain why we can't combine them, because each school has their own district code, and we can't combine them together through the use of the BEST grant. Each school has to stand alone. We would have to follow a different process if we're going to do that, and it would be considered a new build, and the BEST grant doesn't support that. So that's why we're not able to do that. But there are other options. So let's say the waiver doesn't go through, the district would still be able to fund one of the projects on its own using the district reserves, or if we still wanted to move forward with both, if both applications were approved, it could be contingent on a bond passing for a district.
Okay.
Yeah, so as you know, we are currently, at the same time, looking at a bond for 2018. If we were awarded both schools as well, there's some other financial options that are available in terms of COPs on other buildings. And then once we relocate those two schools, is selling those other properties as well, so.
Our goal is really to try to build our two new facilities without having to go to the taxpayers. If that's not an option yet, we'll definitely explore that, but we're trying to do it without having to increase their taxes, as we may have other projects down the road that we may need their support with. So if we can do this without outreaching to them and increasing their tax base, we'd like to do and explore all those options first.
I think they'd like to see that, that we went ahead and were able to build two schools without increasing their taxes, and saying how much work we've done to not increase taxes, and hopefully they'll see that and say, you know what, we want to continue this work, and we're willing to vote on that new bond.
Thank you.
If you have other questions that come up after you read through your work, don't hesitate to provide them to Dr. Abrego and or Monica, and they'll provide it to Gianni, and we'll help to get you the answers that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of other study session items. Policy CBA, qualifications and duties of the superintendent. I think this is yours, Dr. Hyde.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know what format to present this in, but I guess I could, I'll just proceed with this. Whereas Board Policy File CBA, the first and second enumerated duties of the superintendent are to, 1, keep the board informed on the condition of the district's educational and support system, and 2, provide necessary background information. Whereas there are many changes in personnel that I have not been made aware of. For example, and to the best of my knowledge, a person who was a principal in Adams 14 last year was moved to district administration to be the coordinator of Beyond Textbooks. I was informed only by happenstance that he has moved again to head secondary education. In error, I thought that he had relinquished his role with BT. Other similar incidents occur as well. Whereas moving personnel from post to post can strengthen staff by making them versatile and essentially cross-trained, rapid and frequent personnel movements can become counterproductive. Nevertheless, this is the superintendent's prerogative. Whereas, as a board member, I do want to know, to use a baseball analogy, who is on first and who is on second. So that the reporting requirements are reasonable, I suggest that changes at the school level and within the district staff be reported to the board on a weekly basis, except for any changes in a principal or key staff person, which will be reported immediately. Therefore, I offer the following for a first reading, discussion, and first vote. I move that item 1 of the CBA file of board policies have the following words added to its text. Quote, "The superintendent shall report weekly in writing to the board stating all changes in personnel or in their responsibilities, except for changes involving principals and key district staff or their responsibilities, which will be reported immediately." End quote.
Do you have copies of that for us?
I have,
It's behind the blue sheet.
I have,
Oh, it is behind the blue sheet?
Yeah, it's the second page. No, back. There you go, right there.
Other side,
See the red?
the other
Oh,
side.
no, the other
Red.
side.
The other's about the red.
There.
Oh.
See that red?
Got it.
This hasn't been revised since August 25, 92. So I'm sure CASB should have even if you add what Dr. Hyde said, CASB should have more than this to add to qualification duty of a superintendent.
Are you suggesting we check with CASB to see if they have an updated policy?
Well, I'm saying you still can do this on the first reading. And then the second reading, we should have, I'm sure by Friday in our updates, the changes if you want to add to the second reading, but you don't have to stop the first reading to continue on.
This isn't listed as an action item tonight.
Right, I'm saying, but if Dr. Hyde is asking to make changes, is that what you're asking? So we,
for that addition to be
right,
added.
so we have to put this on the agenda for any changes. We just
Well,
can't.
yeah, I think you have to have a consensus. Do we want it on the, talk about it? If we don't have enough to get the consensus, then we don't want to waste time doing it. But I think if Dr. Hyde should put up there, consensus to try to get a consensus to try to talk about this to add to the policy. And if there is no consensus, then it just lays. But I think before we can put it on the agenda, we have to have a consensus.
So is it, Mr. Chairman, is it correct that we do not make any formal motions and we do not vote during study sessions? Is that correct or not?
Correct, we don't make any, we'll
Okay,
study it, and then
so-
we'll decide whether or not we're gonna move it forward, and we'll put it on the
Okay.
agenda for a vote.
So do other board members have any comments on this suggested change or
Well,
addition?
Yeah, I just have one thing to say, because this is something that would go according to, for Dr. Javier's Abrego's contract, and his contract would supersede policy. So if it's already in his contract, that, even if we tried to make a change in the, what is it, CBA, his contract supersedes any policy we put here.
No,
No, it
no,
doesn't.
no,
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 it
that's not
doesn't.
correct.
I'll-
No, he has stipulation in his contract, which is in here, that the Board of Education required, but we are changing the board policy.
But we
are-
haven't changed it. This is a discussion.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So we're discussing if Dr. Hyde wants to, he wants
He
to
can,
add 15.
he can
that's what
ask
I'm
it
saying.
to open it.
Right.
But what I'm also saying, that to change that, we're gonna have to go through his contract to make sure that stipulation is not already in there,
Okay.
because then we're double downing on it.
Well, I don't,
I don't mind I was reading through the superintendent's contract over the weekend, and it says that it refers in general to his compliance with what's stated in the contract, and one of the statements is that he will go along with other yet to be specified policies and statements of the board.
because we haven't had no policy updates since last May. Is that right, Dr. Abrego?
I believe that is correct.
So
We
if this is 92, I'm sure we can get policy updates, because is that what, aren't we paying CASB to send us policy updates, Monica?
It's up to the board to update its own policies.
Is up to, so what was we sending
They
to
guide
CASB?
us. They guide our policies. They guide the board.
Well, I think
Create policies.
CASB made the statement that they have policies that they could share with the district if we were interested in looking at some of their
They're
updated policies.
available.
Right.
Or that they would update the policy for us if we asked them to. That was what we learned in that training session. That's what I
Right.
heard in that training session. So what I have down so far right now is to request to CASB a revised document like this, okay? That may be in there, okay? I don't know whether or not that's in CASB's request. But what I'm saying is that what I believe what Harvest is saying is that maybe there's some other things in this policy that need to be changed also, and we should probably get that other policy to see if they're in compliance with what we think we should have. And then we can look and see if that's not in there, and then we can have discussion as to whether or not we want to add that. That's what I think I hear. I don't know, okay? I'm not trying to say we can't do anything. I'm just saying there's probably some things that we should be doing that I think I hear from you. And one of them is request an updated policy at the CASB if they have one. And if not, then we as a board probably should look at the policy, because there is a process to revise the policy. Maybe it needs to be changed. I don't know. And move forward from there.
Well, yeah, and again, trying to address the heart of the issue, I just feel like there's so many changes that are made fairly quickly, and I feel like I'm kind of caught blindsided when people come up and say, oh, who do I speak to for this or that? And I don't know. And it seems to me as a board member, I ought to know kind of who the key players are. And that comes right under number 1, keep the board informed on the condition of the district's educational and support system. And part of that would be to know who the key players are and what their roles are.
So maybe what would help is if we could get HR to make a flow chart of who's where, with names, current names, always keep it updated to us. Because I think I asked for that too before, was I needed a current flow chart to say, okay, community board, superintendent, who's under the superintendent, their names, current, and then down the chain of command. I do think that would be helpful to all of us.
Yeah, that was more than I was requesting, but I think that's a super idea. No, I agree. No. Yes, no, I think that's going further than what I was requested, but I think it's also superior to what I was requesting.
But it's really easy for them to do.
Okay,
to make a flow chart.
I think it's a great idea.
And they could keep it, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you could update it monthly maybe, or every 2 weeks if it's, so, because things do change.
Sure. Well, and I guess the whole point is, I mean, we do get at the regular meetings, the superintendent tells us about terminations and transfers and that so forth. But I think that for key people, I really would like to know if they're key, kind of immediately. I mean, the flow chart's a good idea, but then I don't know whether it becomes too cumbersome to update that flow chart. You know, if somebody's put on administrative leave or somebody retires kind of unexpectedly, I want to know just so that I'm not caught unaware of what's going on.
Well, some of that, Dr. Hyde, if you look under personnel, they always put who's retired, who's been transferred. So in a way, they're already telling us. My objective to putting this in there is next time we come up with something else, and before we know it, we're micromanaging the superintendent, and I don't buy that. If we're going to micromanage the superintendent, then we shouldn't have one.
Well, I'm not trying to micromanage.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying when we start putting policies in there, you introduce this when if you look through your personnel, they already tell us who resigned, who was transferred, who was put on leave.
And really, if they're put on leave, doesn't necessarily mean they're gone. It just means they're on leave. They could come back to their position.
But going back, Timmy, I think we have to get a consensus to find out if we want to continue this and not be going, and we could save that for later.
And I see it not an issue of micromanaging, but an issue of being informed as a board member. And, you know, when a key person, the head of a department or something, is put on administrative leave, I'd like to know about it. And that's not managing, that's just being kept abreast of the key things that are going on in the district.
Mr. Archuleta, if I could just speak, I believe that on Friday updates, we try to give you all the necessary information. So I believe that everything that Dr. Hyde is asking for would be in our Friday updates.
Right. That's what I was going to say, because I get that information, and you have that information in front of you today.
Well, and maybe I overlooked it, but I wasn't aware, and maybe it was in a Friday update, and I just didn't read it carefully enough. But the example I used was with Matt Schwartz, who I thought he was just doing BT, and then I thought he, erroneously, as I said, I thought he had been transferred to, or his duties had been reassigned to be in charge of secondary education. And then when I ran into him, he said, oh, well, I'm actually doing secondary education and keeping my BT responsibilities. So, but I never read that in a Friday update. If it was there, then I just overlooked it. But was that posted in the Friday update?
I think if you look at the superintendent's responsibilities, it gives me authority to make decisions in the best interests of the district as far as personnel and placing them where they're needed to help us improve.
And I understand that entirely. My point is I just simply want to be informed that occurred. I'm not asking to approve it or to micromanage. I am just asking to be informed.
and I will state again, we give you all the information, I give you all the information in Friday updates.
So his reassignment was in one of the Friday updates, is that correct?
I don't know if that was in the Friday updates or not, but.
Well, that's the type of thing that I would want in the Friday updates.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what you're asking for? You want to update the Friday updates?
The
Yes,
information.
Mr. Chairman.
To include what?
Any changes of key personnel, or either the change in their duties, or they're being put on administrative leave, or they're being reassigned, or retiring, or taking early retirement, or any, change in their status or their responsibilities. Now, not piddly ones, but we're talking about, if there's a major change in their responsibilities or in their role within the district. I think as board members, we ought to be abreast of the key people that are being shuffled around.
So I guess
So
key people has me, I don't know which people.
Well, I'm willing to, grant some flexibility there. I think we're all capable of, parsing that. I'm willing to let the superintendent use his good judgment on that. And if we think that we're not getting adequate information, we can tweak it. But I'm perfectly willing to leave that up to his discretion.
Okay, because that's not what this says. This says licensed personnel. That could be a teacher, it could be anything.
I understand that, but it seems to me that we've moved this the focus of this discussion from a motion to an administrative detail. And so we're really, we're just talking about this.
Right.
So it seems to me that if we agree, all agree.
Right, I'm trying to get a consensus, and what I have so far written down is update the Friday updates to include any changes of, and you say key personnel.
Administrative?
That confuses me.
Well, and the school would be, the principals are administrative.
Right, the principals or assistant principals.
They're all,
And
any of that,
those are all key people.
Administrative.
You
in
want
my mind.
administrators.
Yes.
because you're.
But a secretary is an
No,
administrator,
she's
but
not.
I
No,
don't think
she's
we
not.
need to include a secretary in that category.
No.
In the regular biweekly updates we get
They're
in the
that.
agenda, I think that's adequate for those people.
Okay, so what
Is
you're.
that clear?
Yeah, so what you're asking for is update the Friday updates to include any changes of administrators. That's what you're asking for.
Okay, yeah, and now you've got me. Well, for example, was Mr. Thompson and Ms. Burke, are they administrators?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that covers it. And the school site principals and APs. Yeah, I think that would be terrific.
Okay, so he's asking for a consensus on update the Friday updates to include any changes of duties to the duties and responsibilities of the administrative staff.
Yeah, and did you say, or changes in the
Yeah.
personnel themselves?
Well, that's what I said in the.
Okay,
In,
I think, was that at the beginning?
so, update the Friday updates to include any changes of personnel or responsibilities of the administrators.
Sounds good.
Can I get a consensus, Mr. Rolla?
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Mr. Thomas?
Just a moment. What about the qualifications and duties of the superintendent too? That's, we go, are we gonna go to, Caspi and to get the difference of the changes?
So what I have written down here on the to-do list is request from CASB a new updated
Okay.
Changes.
Yeah.
Change.
Yes.
and review the superintendent's contract to see if this is if they're in conflict with each other. That's what I have.
Yes, I'm
So
fine.
the consensus I'm looking for is the change to the updates that Monica puts out on Fridays in the personnel or responsibilities to include any changes of administrators.
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, Connie?
Board President, may I make a comment? I think our HR person would like to make a comment pertaining to what you're saying.
Okay?
Since I'm going to probably be preparing this report, or at least my office is, one of the things I would ask is any changes is pretty broad, because we can have minor change in job responsibilities that aren't significant, and they don't change the job, they don't change the reporting responsibility, they really are kind of internal. For example, Dr. Patterson and I have decided that we're going to divvy up various job responsibilities within HR in a certain way, and then during crunch time, she starts doing some of those because I'm busy doing something else. So I think I would suggest, instead of any changes, maybe significant changes in job responsibilities, or that, or.
How about permanent changes? Does permanent changes work?
Well, even.
Well, it's the magnitude rather than the
Yeah.
permanency that's a concern. And I would say to address the magnitude, the word significant change is fine. And again, I'm willing to leave that to the superintendent or staff to use their best judgment as to what constitutes a significant change. And then if we go along and find that the information is not
Yeah,
what
we
we
gotta go into
wanted,
executive
Then
session.
we will tweak it.
So here's what I have. We got to go into executive session here. Update the Friday updates to include any significant changes of personnel or responsibilities of administrators. Okay? So now can I get a consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
For that, yes, but not for CBA yet.
Okay. Dr. Hyde? Yes, for me. I'm good with that. Okay? All right. So we're running a little bit late. We need to move into executive session. Can I get a motion to move into executive session under CRS 246402E? Oh, excuse me. CRS 246402-4, parentheses E, contract negotiations, discuss pending contracts. And then we also have to have an executive session under CRS 246402-4B, legal advice, board to conference with an attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific matters. So what's the board's pleasure? You want to go in under 1 and then come back out and go in under 2, or do you want to go in under 2?
Under
Go
two,
both and go in.
Do both.
two, both of them.
So can I get a motion to move into executive session for,
Motion to move into executive session.
Second.
any discussion? So we'll move into the executive session?
Roll
Oh,
call.
excuse me. Roll call, Monica, please.
Mr. Archuleta?
Aye.
Dr. Hyde?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
So we'll move into executive session at 5:15.